The following show is rated M for mature audiences. Parental discretion advised. Previously on the Supernaughts program.
Yeah, George Norrie is really a very, very bad host. I listened to him for a little bit after Art left the first time, and just did not get into his style at all.
Cosmic horror, eldritch horror, the Cthulhu mythos. I think they're the last great untapped final frontier of horror. We've tapped zombies, and then we've double tapped them, and now we're quadruple tapping them. 5 zombie TV shows. How many is enough?
Disney's Maleficent. That I thought she was the best villain and a strong female character, and she wasn't in it for the guy or anything like that, and she was one badass babe, and I loved her.
Welcome to the Supernaughts, everybody. Fandom's only debate show. I'm Slate Fistcrunch, and joining me, as usual, is the man that eats Dairy Queen for lunch and weak-ass arguments for dinner, Scott Colbert. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Slate. That was funny.
Next up is, I don't know, I was just looking at the pictures, RJD. What's up, man?
Did you read that on the back of a fortune cookie?
Finally joining us today is a very special guest, an entertainment reporter, Miss San Francisco, private chef of Beverly Hills, and host of FX Movie Downloads. The Supernaughts are pleased to welcome the real Miss Congeniality, Sasha Perl-Raver. Welcome to the Supernaughts, Sasha.
Well, we'll see how congenial I am toward the end, but I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, for those of you new to the show, we start off getting to know our guests a little bit and then dive into the debate portion, where points are awarded in a purely subjective manner. Following that is the over-under segment, where we decide if something's overrated or underrated. And at the end, whichever one of you has the most points will get to rant on any topic he or she chooses. All right. But before we do the great debate, let's get to know Sasha a little bit. Sasha, could you tell us about yourself?
Wow. I like long walks on the beach and sushi. I mean, I love a man with strong hands. What do you need to know? I have a cat named Swayze. I love cotton candy. I host a show called FX Movie Download that's on FX every Friday at 8 o'clock. I just saw John Wick, and I'm completely obsessed, and I'm so glad to see Keanu Reeves back in fine form. And if there's anything I'm really good at, it's eating a burrito regardless of how big it is.
Wow, she had me at cat, and then she had me again at burrito. But she might have had me in there somewhere with John Wick, too.
Oh, so good. John Wick, a burrito with your cat curled up next to you. I mean, that's like a perfect night.
Well, and the man with strong hands. I mean, that would make my night.
How is how is FX Download?
FX Download's awesome. I've worked for a bunch of different networks. I was at NBC for 4 years here in LA. I've worked for Food Network. FX are the nicest, best bosses I've ever had in my life. And it's just one of those places where it's really cool to be involved with people who make stuff like American Horror Story and, Sons of Anarchy. And they give me full reign to talk about whatever I want and run my mouth in whatever stupid ways I probably shouldn't. And that's great. And they also invite me to fun parties. So it's fantastic. And the show is basically, the premise of the show is we take a movie that's already come out and we show you behind the scenes of it. So we let you know how Avatar was filmed. So one of the episodes, we got to go down to the stages where they shoot the film, where they're going to shoot the sequels, and got to experience what it would be like if I was Sam Worthington, which is an amazing entree that I'm so grateful to have. And we get to talk to really cool people, directors who maybe make movies I did like or didn't like. There's always something interesting in every film that's made, whether it's good or bad, and there's something cool to be learned in the process of the making of it, and that's what I love so much about our show.
Sasha, last week we had on Christine Morgan, and she's a horror writer, and one of the things that we talked about was how women aren't taken seriously in horror. Now, have you had any problems being a woman and doing the job that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think it's just horror. I remember I interviewed Lily Tomlin a couple of years ago, and I said, "Do you think that the industry is afraid of funny women?" And she said, "Absolutely." I mean, look at what happened with poor Renee Zellweger this week. You know, she comes out, her face looks different, and everybody flips out. You are damned if you do, you are damned if you don't. Women are supposed to be weak, but we're also supposed to be sluts, but we're also supposed to be smart, but we're also supposed to be a million things. No one is ever happy with any of them. If you're too pretty, then you can't be smart. If you're too ugly, then you can't be sexy. And it's just a constant uphill battle. But I mean, it could be worse. I could be a black gay man. I mean, there's a million ways that life could be more difficult. But yeah, I think in every industry, horror, entertainment, everything, women are always sort of discounted. And I came in through the blog world. And I would hang out with all these writers who always thought that their opinion was stronger than mine just because they have a penis. And I have a lot of very strong opinions despite my vagina. And I think that women in general are just supposed to be looked at and not always listened to. And that's probably why I'm so loud. Oh, doorbell. I don't even know who that is. I'm going to ignore it. You guys are more important.
You sure you don't need to get that door?
No, it's probably FedEx.
Scott had another question. I wanted to ask it for you. When you interviewed McConaughey and Jared Leto,
yeah,
were they as dreamy in real life?
Well, Jared Leto, I mean, come on, that man's ombre is the stuff of dreams. I have loved Jared Leto since Jordan Catalano days of My So-Called Life. Matthew McConaughey, I've interviewed a number of times, and he's just so, I love him. He is everything that you hope and dream, going all the way back to Wooderson. Although we will talk about this later in the show, but I have seen Interstellar, and there's much to discuss within that film.
Ooh.
But yes, they are totally dreamy and totally delightful. And I love Dallas Buyers Club, and I'm so glad that it got the recognition that it deserved because it was a small movie and it took, 12 years to make. So kudos to them.
Well, I have one question. I was doing some research on you when RJD told us you were going to be a guest. And if this doesn't confirm my gay gene, I don't know what will.
Oh,
but
God.
You interviewed Barbara Streisand.
I did. Yeah.
That's awesome.
How was that? I mean,
well,
how
the
was
funniest thing about the Barbara Streisand interview was, you walk into the room and you see Babs with her nails and her austerity, and she's very, very engaging. She's really she's smaller than I thought she would be. I thought she would be bawdy in like that Bette Midler way, but she's just very thoughtful and lovely. And then I went home and I looked at the interview tapes, and it was amazing because on my side, it was full HD, normal lighting, regular. On her side with Seth Rogen, it was fog filter, Vaseline on the lens, pantyhose on top of the Vaseline. She had this sheen that was so amazing.
Jeez.
Yes, if you are Barbara Streisand, that is exactly what you do to your footage. You're like, no, that is not the lighting or the look of my camera angle. And then you would cut back to my angle, and it was a little star filtery, but nothing compared to Barbara's. And it just made me actually very happy because I'm like, yes, of course she went in, and of course she demanded that. It was awesome.
That is fantastic. I've loved her for forever.
Is it a tough question to answer who your favorite was?
My favorite interview of all time? Oh man. You know what? I loved the movie Warrior, and it was really underwatched, which is too bad because it's a great film. It was Tom Hardy and Nick Nolte, and it's just a really incredible movie about two brothers in MMA. And Nick Nolte was being really, really difficult that day. He was in a bathrobe. He was in a fedora. He was being sort of nonsensical. And before I went in, a bunch of people walked out and, they looked sort of stricken. And apparently he had just been making up stories and ranting for the entire interview. And he hadn't given anybody anything usable the whole day. And I went in and I sat down,
And as soon as we started, he started messing with me. He was talking about cellulite and he was talking about his fat ass. And I just threw it right back at him. And I was like, honey, if you're going to talk about cellulite, I'll show you mine right now. And I pulled my leg up and I squeezed it so you could see my dimples. And he started laughing. And he was like, okay, what's your question? And I gave him a question. And I said, whether it's sports or film, what is the makings of a true greatness? What is that one entity that everybody has to have in order to excel the way these guys do in MMA and you have in your film career? And he got really quiet and he actually teared up and he started to weep. And he said, when you're only comfortable on a stage, whether it's as an Olympic athlete or on a film set, when you can't exist in real life the way you can on that stage, that's the making of greatness. And it was so honest and it was so beautiful. And when I walked out, his publicist grabbed me and she was like, you're the only person all day who's gotten him to talk. And it was a really proud moment. But also I was like, man, Nick Nolte, he's a legend and he's sort of become almost a caricature of himself. But he's an amazing actor and he's a really cool dude. And I love him and respect him. And that interview I will always remember. And it was a great movie.
It's a great answer.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now let's beat her at the debate.
All right.
I'm excited.
All right, let's get into the great debate. Topic 1. Cable networks, such as AMC and FX, are pushing the violence, language, and sexual envelope about as far as they can. Is this enhanced storytelling, or is this shock value gimmicks? Scott?
Well, the short answer to that, I suppose, is it depends. It depends on the show and what they're trying to do. I remember back when NYPD Blue was on and they showed Dennis Franz's ass on TV. And really, if you're going to break taboos, Dennis Franz's ass is really not the way to go, in my opinion. Nothing against Dennis Franz. I love him. I just don't happen to want to see his ass on my TV. But you can even go further back than that with All in the Family in the episode where Edith nearly gets raped, or on Good Times when Jimmy gets VD, or STD as the kids say today. But those are in service of a story, and I think what we see with The Walking Dead, it's in service of the story. I think there's probably more gratuitous sex, violence, and whatnot in theatrical movies than there actually is on TV. I know that didn't really kind of answer the question, but it's, that's a tough one. I don't see a lot of gratuitous stuff on the cable networks.
Well, RJD, jump in here. Is that an answerable question?
I think it is. I think at times it has broken that line and it's too much. And I'm as guilty as anybody because I'm watching those shows that have been pushed over the line, especially with FX dating us back as the Shield as far as violence and nip tuck with sex. And I guess today, Sasha mentioned American Horror Story. They're getting away with things on that would, if they made a film, it would be rated R. And the torture and in some cases also the rape. And I wrote an article on it. I said, when is too much too much? And I think that at times it is too much. And I can't turn it off.
Sasha, get in here.
When you first posed this question, my first thought was the show The Nick. The Nick, which is so gory and so graphic and so compelling. They show things, look at like ER. ER was a show that showed 1 million surgeries, and they never showed a surgery that came anywhere close to what The Nick has done. And obviously it's a different kind of advanced medicine, but the detail, the unflinching eye, and it makes it a better show. But then you look at something like Girls, and I'm sorry, but Lena Dunham, I do not need – talk about Dennis Franz's ass. Do I need to see any more of Lena Dunham's naked body? It's not because of the size or the shape of it. It's just you don't need to have sex that often. You don't need to be naked that often. And it feels like
a fallback. So I agree with Scott. I think it depends on the show. I think it depends on how it's being used. I think that, you're catering to a viewer that no longer has the same sort of mores and ethics that maybe existed 30, even 15 years ago. But I do think that the best TV is the TV that pushes an envelope. And whether it's going too far, we'll know later on, but you won't know how far to take it unless you do push it to a limit. And then you can back off of it. But I'll take that over, watching the same like Family Matters show that was on TGIF for years and years and years. I mean, TV is just better now. Basic cable and regular network television is just better.
I agree, and I could use I don't want to use the G word, but I will. I think gratuitous is the word that you could use to describe. And if it's not gratuitous, then and it fits the story, knock yourself out.
I agree with what Sasha said. I think the times have definitely changed from back when I was a kid. But I think today's audiences are more sophisticated. And I kind of hate to use the word sophisticated with the general audience, but I think that's kind of true. The types of things that we see in television today and on cable and in movies is a little bit different than what I grew up on. And I think it's because we've constantly been pushing the edge further and further. And Oz really was the first show to really, really hit that stride with the language and the sex and the rape and the brutality in the prison setting. That was such an amazing show. And I think that really opened the floodgates for others to say, hey, look, they can do this, so can we.
Yeah.
And they have.
I think if it's looking for truth, then that's an asset. But if it's just trying to shock people into watching, it's not.
I think it depends on the show. I mean, I was a huge fan of True Blood right up until the last 2 seasons, which were horrendous. And when I look at the last episode and the way that they did it, the way everything played out, it felt like they were reaching for shock and they just started killing off characters because they didn't know what to do. And they needed people to talk about it within social media. But then when you think about other shows, like, I don't know that there's a show that has offended me, and maybe it's just because I have like a different moral compass, but there hasn't been anything where I felt like, oh, they're doing this purely for gratuitous whatever. It's all sort of felt like when I watch Masters of Sex, nothing about that show feels like, oh, they're doing this just because they want to show me boobies. No, they're doing it because that was the premise of the show. They're doing it because this is what science is, and this was the quest that these 2 people were on, and it happened to involve sex. And now we get to see that sex in a way that we couldn't have seen it 20 years ago. Thanks, HBO. Or Showtime. Sorry. Thanks, Showtime. But I don't think that it's just for shock value. There are some shows that I think have to keep up with the Joneses and maybe push further. And like Scott said, Oz definitely opened that floodgate. But like, I don't think that Orange is the New Black throws in lesbian sex because they want to titillate. I think they do it because that's what happens in a women's prison.
I also think it's very hard to shock people today, as opposed to prior to when the internet became ubiquitous and it's everywhere. It was a lot easier to shock people because they didn't have access to see some of the stuff that we see now. I mean, we never ever would have been able to have seen the beheadings from ISIS prior to the internet. Not that that's something that I want to see, but it's there. And when you see that, how can a pair of boobs be shocking? How can lesbians be shocking?
That's a really good point.
I just reiterate what you said. Thank HBO for boobs.
That's a good close. We'll move on to topic 2. Teasers, trailers, extended trailers, TV spots. Is this necessary, or is this taking away from the movie-going experience, RJD?
I think it's helping to promote the experience, and I think it can be done. They just don't need to show the plot points in the teaser. And teasers create a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. Just don't tell me the story. I don't want to see each plot point in a teaser. And the more access, the better. I love it. I eat it up. Watching a show tonight on DVR so I can see a little bit more of the Avengers. I'm the worst at this. I'm the one that says there's too much rape on Sons of Anarchy, but I can't stop watching it. So I would like the trailers to be better and not spoil the movie for me. But as soon as they come out, I'm the first one on the internet looking at them.
Sasha?
I hate them. I stopped watching trailers probably 3 years ago. I mean, I know I want to watch the Avengers trailer. I do. And I feel slightly less informed than my colleagues because I haven't. But at the same time, I can't take it. It ruins everything. Set photos, extended trailers, featurettes, all of this stuff. And I'm just like, no, let me watch the movie. Let me experience the movie. You can't have that anymore. I'm going to see Nightcrawler tonight and a commercial. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the word. A commercial came on and I was like, no, because I know that they are going to show me everything. And because of the way my brain works, I'll remember the scenes and then I'll be looking for those scenes in the film. And every trailer shows the final moment in the movie. Everyone does it. I don't understand why they can't make movie trailers the way they make TV coming attractions. End of the week, you get a 15-second quick roll of what's going to happen. You get a couple of the plot points, and that's it. And then you get cliffhangers, and then you have this anticipation. Instead, I mean, I sometimes watch trailers of movies that I've already seen, and I am appalled by what they show. They show the final moment. They show the last minute of the last act. It's sick. It's wrong, and it is ruining the film-going experience. And I understand there's an insatiable desire for this stuff, but we need to retrain people how to watch movies because people get so annoyed about spoilers. What are you talking about, spoilers? What are you talking about? You watched the trailer. You spoiled it for yourself.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Sasha on this one. The trailers today are just absolutely ridiculous with the amount of plot that they show. At this point, really, all you need to say is a new Avengers movie, new Star Wars movie, Doctor Strange is coming out. And all you need to do is say that, and you're going to generate the buzz. But
totally.
To continually put, and not even trailers, but clips. I've seen where they've had movies that have shown like 5 and 10 minute clips from it. Why? Why would I want to go see the movie if I can get everything, from clips and whatever? Yeah, we live in an age where there's too much information at times, and that's so true, particularly with the entertainment industry. It's a nonstop blitz, and it makes my head hurt sometimes.
Why do they do it then? If it's ruining the moviegoing experience for 2/3 of you, why do they do it?
You have to promote the film. You have to get excitement about the film. And I agree with y'all 100% when it's done wrong. And I'll give you a perfect example. Man of Steel. Man of Steel explained every plot point in that film in its trailer. And I'm talking about the big trailer. You see the conflict he has as a child. You see him first becoming Superman. You see, everything. Everything but the neck snap. If they put the neck snap at the end of the trailer, you'd have the whole film there. So the flip side of that is, and I'm struggling to find a really good trailer lately, but I think Keanu Reeves' John Wick trailer is just about spot on. And it just gives you enough. It just gives you a taste. You know what you're going to see. We're not going to, you could maybe even have a little less and not totally spoil it for you, but they got to put those catchphrases in there because they're selling. At the end of the day, it's a business and they're trying to sell you.
Well, yeah, and that's very true. And when they put, an insane amount of clips up on the internet, and when they, put all these other different things up there, it's for clicks, it's for sales. It's not necessarily as much about getting you to go see the movie as it is getting you to go to their website, making the clicks, and getting the ad revenue from that.
Sasha, do you have anything to follow up with that?
I totally agree with everything that you guys are saying. I think that it does go back to marketing. I think social media, YouTube has sort of changed how a film is going to be perceived, how it has to be presented. But at the same time, I love that we have seen a sliver of Ben Affleck in the Batsuit, and we've seen the Batmobile a little bit, but it was sort of that like grainy photo. You don't really see that much detail. And it feels personal because it was Zack Snyder who delivered it, as opposed to, 57 images leaked from the set that are crappy and like a PA took them and then sold them to TMZ. And I don't need to see 5 minutes of a movie. I want to sit down and I want to watch a movie. And I think that it diminishes the experience, particularly for me, maybe less so for other people. But like, I used to love the Coming Attraction show that was on E! Back in like the late 80s, early 90s, because you could watch movie trailers and it was the only time you would get to see them. And it was a great experience. I would sit there and I would watch 30 minutes of movie trailers because I didn't have access unless I actually went to a movie theater otherwise. But we've taken it and it's gone way too far. And the way trailers are cut is insane. It's an editing issue. It's a content issue. And there's too many websites vying for the same thing. So everybody is just flooding the market with the same information. I mean, the Marvel event this morning, I had to get off Twitter because I'm like, oh, shut up. I'm hearing the same story from 47 different outlets. I only need to hear it from one.
All right, we'll move on to topic 3. With HD, 4K, 3D, Blu-ray, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and of course FX Movie Download, is staying in comparable or better than going to the theater? Sasha?
Obviously, I think that there's so much content now that you have to have all those different ways to see stuff. There are movies that are better served on a big screen, but there are so many movies that wouldn't be seen if it weren't for those different delivery avenues. There are small movies being made by really interesting filmmakers who wouldn't get distribution if it weren't for a Hulu or a Netflix. And now people have more power of choice. And it becomes an issue for the studios because they do have to shove a million trailers and a million images down our throats to be like, you want to see this, you want to see this, you want to see this. But you get to have a broader selection and more interesting choices. You also get to see films in a different way. Like I said, the thing I love about our show is we get to educate viewers who love film about how a film is made. And that's a sneak into something that you don't get otherwise. That's what's so great about like a picture-in-picture on a Blu-ray. You get to experience the movie, but you also get to know so much more about it. And I think that that's awesome. However, there are certain films that just can't be seen on a small screen. They don't belong there. And they need the respect of sitting down in a theater, paying $17, not including snacks and parking, and letting it wash over you. Although the one thing I really miss, I was talking about this the other day, Birdman is such an amazing movie. And I wonder what the viewing experience of it would be like if they still had reel changes and you could see the cigarette burns in the corner when you went reel to reel. Because it feels so immersive and it feels so continuous. If that didn't happen anymore, what would that movie be like? That movie wouldn't be the same if it had been done 10 years ago. But yeah, I think that movies are just changing. With digital, everything changes. Keanu Reeves, again, did a really interesting documentary called Side by Side, which is about, digital versus actual film. And you forget things like with the flicker in film, which we don't have anymore really, because almost everything is digital projection, because there's space in between the frames, you would sit in the dark for about 30 minutes in a 90-minute movie, which creates this weird dream state in people's minds. And we don't have that anymore. And I miss that. But I think the film-going experience is still something that is so special and is unlike anything else. And when you sit in a dark theater and you have this communal experience with all these other people, it's a really cool moment to share. And now I think the reason to see a movie, it used to be see a movie on the first weekend because you don't want the print to get bad and grainy and hairy and funky. Now the reason you see a movie on the first weekend is so it doesn't get spoiled by Twitter. But it's still cool to know that you're out in a theater with people who are as passionate as you are and want to see something before anybody else. And I love that.
Scott, you still sit in the dark most of the time. What do you think?
Well, that's because I'm in the dark period. That's just kind of how I roll. I think movies are a communal experience. And I haven't seen Birdman, but I've heard enough about how it was filmed to know that if I sat in my living room and watched it, I would probably not have the same effect as if I saw it in the movie theater. And that's not because of the special effects or anything. It's just because I just have a 32-inch, flat screen to watch it on. I don't have this huge screen that really just kind of sucks you in when the movie is working. It does anyway. So I think while having Hulu and everything else is really nice, nothing can beat going into a movie theater and just being drawn in. It's almost like an aphrodisiac. Unfortunately, even though it is a communal experience, these people around you tend to kind of ruin it with their keeping those cell phones out and yakking and yada, yada, yada. So I tend to watch most of my movies at home because the people around me just don't know how to behave.
RJD, what do you think?
I have to say, I think there's more bad than good at this point.
You mean bad versus good? What do you mean?
Going to the theaters, the whole experience, technical problems, sound issues, teenagers, children talking, cell phones. Those moments that Scott mentioned, I love them. I love when people stand up and clap at the end of a great film. I love those moments in superhero films where you can kind of like go, yeah, and everybody kind of has the same feeling at the same time. And I want more of those, and I hope to get them. But those are fleeting. They're 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 times. Most of the time, if you go to a film the weekend it opens, and that's when you like to see them. That's when the movie studios like for you to see them. It's overcrowded. The popcorn's bad. The lines are long. Somebody's always getting a cell phone call in an important part. And when you're at home, you can pause it and answer the doorbell for the FedEx man. The technology, your screen, you can get a big screen. It sounds great. It looks great. You have it at your fingertips. Hey, let's watch an Arnold movie. Bang. 30 seconds later, you're watching it. So I still love going to the movies. I still go every month. But the experience is not equal. Not for me. There's still a lot of good. And I will see those big tentpole movies at the theater. But it's better at home. It's the same as sports. It's better at home.
Yeah, I remember one of the best movie-going experiences I had was seeing the original Rocky. It was back in '76. And we didn't go the first weekend. I think it was maybe a couple of weeks after, because my parents didn't like the crowds on opening weekends. But even 3 weeks later, after it opened, that theater was packed. And when you get into the fighting scenes towards the, particularly the climax, everybody's up and cheering for Rocky, and it was electric. And I haven't really had an experience like that in a very, very long time. And I miss that.
Well, then you should come see Fast and Furious 7 with me, because every time I see a Fast and Furious movie, at some point I end up standing up in the theater and going, yeah, you did, and clapping.
Ben takes his shirt off. Scott will stand up and say, yeah, too.
And then I'll go back to the dark.
Yes. Well, you guys all mentioned it's a communal experience going to the movies, but is there something to be said for sitting at home and getting an intimate experience with the movie instead?
Yes, there is. And also finding a movie that you wouldn't find at a theater. I mean, there are movies that play in Los Angeles and New York that never find their way to the center of the country. And you can only find them on Netflix and some streaming outlets. That's it. And that's a really great thing for filmmakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point on that. Was Terry Gilliam's last movie that just came out. I was able to see it at a screening for one of the theater owners here I know. So he had actually like a special screening of it. And I got to see it that way. But when it came out, it was nowhere in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense.
I
It was a
remember
fantastic movie anyway.
he's a fantastic director. I remember having to drive to Atlanta for films like that, and that's a long drive, and you go to the big city for stuff like Mulholland Drive, because it's not at your everyday cinema. It's not at the cinema that plays Pixar films every weekend and stuff like that. So that's another advantage to me of having a good system and watching it at home in good company. You know, you're not with 100 strangers. You're with one or two close friends. They laugh at your jokes even when they're not funny.
We'll move on. Although I do dispute whether Gilliam's a great director. He's been 30 years since he's made a great movie.
Zero Theorem is a great movie.
I haven't seen that one.
And if you had read my review, you'd have known that.
I would know what you thought.
My opinion is the only one that matters.
I think he's a visionary director, but it has been a while since he's done anything that really is stand on its own, amazing, brilliant. Although I love the documentary about him trying to make Don Quixote and failing.
That is such a great movie, documentary.
That documentary was incredible because it shows you so much about the filmmaking process and like the pain and suffering that goes into everything. And then to have it come to nothing is just shocking. And it's really, really well done. And it's got, what's his face? Johnny Depp. Oh, what's his face? Good old Johnny Depp. That's a really interesting film. That's my favorite thing that he's done in the last 15 years, probably.
Have you seen Zero Theorem?
I have, and I liked it. I just didn't love it.
Fair enough. I love, but I think maybe because I haven't seen as many movies as I used to, that the ones that I do see, I tend to really like a lot. That one and Boyhood. Although Boyhood is still my favorite movie of the year.
Oh, because Boyhood is amazing.
Absolutely.
I loved him since Time Bandits. I think he's great. I think I'm the one that actually threw that grade out there. So.
Well, I'm going to be doing the Terry Gilliam next as soon as I finish that last Cronenberg review. I'm off to do Gilliam, so Slate, you can see firsthand exactly what you're missing.
Yeah, I've seen firsthand what he's capable of since Brazil. All right, moving on. We're going to go to the over-under segment. I'm going to throw out some topics, and you tell me if they're overrated, underrated, and why. Sasha, we'll start with you. Hunger Games, overrated, underrated?
Overrated. The first one was great. I love Gary Ross. The second one was good, but I get it. It's like the Twilight thing and like the Harry Potter books. You're going to have a built-in audience, but and the movies are solid. I'm really sad Philip Seymour Hoffman has passed away and we don't get to see what happens with him, but it's just another movie. It's not worth that much hype, and I don't think it'll live on like Star Wars.
Scott, Hunger Games.
Yeah, I agree with Sasha. It doesn't have that classic quality that Star Wars seems to have, or even the Harry Potter seems to have. I like the books, all right. I haven't seen the movies because I read the books, but I just wasn't interested enough to see how they adapted it.
Or JD.
I'm gonna pull a Dio and say they're rated just perfect. And I oddly enough, I really liked both films. I liked the second one better. Bunch of it was filmed in Savannah, Georgia. They're really good films, and they've got a good message. She's a good hero. She's a strong female hero that it's hard to pigeonhole her into some of the negatives that a lot of people do with a good female movie hero. And I think it's rated just right. I think those are important films. Maybe they won't. Obviously, they're not going to have the lasting power of a Star Wars, and maybe not even a Harry Potter. But they deserve their box office. They're good, solid entertainment.
I didn't know that was an option.
We just make this stuff up as we go.
So if it's in Savannah, that automatically qualifies it as a good movie. So like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is your favorite of all time.
That's a very good film.
It's a great book.
It is a good film.
That film has a really good cast. It has
Kevin Spacey,
John Cusack, and Uga.
All right, we'll move on to the next topic. Over under Sons of Anarchy, Scott.
I hate to say it. I've not watched one episode of it because it just doesn't have the type of story that appeals to me.
Oh,
My sister, on the other hand, loves it. She's just nuts for it. But and I've said this before. There comes a point in life where you kind of have to pick and choose what you're going to waste your time on, and there are a lot of other shows I'd much rather waste my time on that I know I'm going to enjoy. Overrated?
He hasn't seen it, but he's got an answer. RJD.
I'm a politician that way.
The show started out underrated, but lately it's overrated.
Why's that?
I think it's that G word we mentioned earlier. I think they've crossed over the line to gratuitousness.
All right. Sasha.
I agree. I think it started out underrated, but I think that now it is rated just perfect. Because I mean, this final season is crazy. You knew that it was going to get super bloody and really nuts, but man, Kurt Sutter, the man gives an appendix because he works so hard. He's a great man for making TV. And I think the show is awesome. I did not watch last night's episode yet, which I'm really excited about, but I think that show is fantastic, and I'm really sad it's the last season. I love Charlie Hunnam. Totally in love with Charlie Hunnam. I keep begging my bosses. I hated his wife, his baby mama. And when she died at the end of last season, I was like, listen, Jax is going to be sad. He needs to, bury his sorrow in a warm body. And see that body, crossover potential. I don't have to have any dialogue. Just let me have sex with them on screen. And they were like, I'm like, no, it'll totally work for the story. I love him.
I like him too. I think he's a star, but this had to be the last season because there's not going to be anybody left alive at the end of it.
Right?
I like some pretty violent stuff, but after watching the show for 7 years, you get invested in the characters, and then you watch them violently murdered.
Over and over. All of them just getting taken down.
I haven't seen this week's episode either, but last week's episode, I couldn't go to sleep after it ended. He's my last favorite character that's still alive, and watching that level, because we mentioned rape and we mentioned sex and we mentioned murder, but we didn't mention torture.
Oh yeah.
And American Horror Story and the Americans and Sons of Anarchy, man, they give you a nice dose of torture, and watching your characters that you've become attached to get tortured like that. It's horrifying.
Yeah. But it's great TV. It's fascinating.
It's great TV. Game of Thrones is exactly the same way. They make you love a character, and then they just turn your guts inside when you see them tortured and murdered.
Yep.
RJD, beauty pageants, over, under.
Beauty pageants have got to be overrated. 2014.
Sasha, beauty pageants, over, under.
Having been in one, I can say they are overrated. However, cheerleading competitions, severely underrated. The next time you're on like ESPN Ocho, check out a cheerleading competition because those things are dope.
Why's that?
Oh my God, the things that these kids do with their bodies are crazy, and they take it so personally. They are so invested. There's lots of tears. It's very high stakes. It's really, it's the Sons of Anarchy of ESPN. It really is. It's awesome.
Sasha, did you know, and this is for Slate too, he's a big sports guy. The sport, if you call it a sport, in high school with the most sprained ankles, the most concussions, and the most broke bones wouldn't be football.
It's cheerleading?
It's cheerleading. And it's not by a nose. It's by over a double the amount of margin. It's extremely dangerous as far as those three things.
Interesting.
Scott, what do you think?
Overrated ever since Bert Parks died, and there's nobody to say, here she comes, Miss America. My honest feeling is I don't really care about beauty pageants one way or the other, but the thing that bothers me are the kid beauty pageants. Those are just, I find, very, very disgusting and despicable. But,
why is it despicable? Fill us in.
Okay, because you're taking these 4 and 5-year-old girls, dressing them up, putting makeup on, flaunting them and parading them around. I just find it very distasteful. And then, God forbid, they end up getting a show like Honey Boo Boo did.
Oh, boy.
I know, who wants that?
We'll move on to the last topic of Over Under. Sasha, FX, overrated, underrated?
Underrated. People should watch it more. No, I have no idea. I think that they turn out great programming, both on the comedy side and on the drama side. The League is seriously underrated. More people need to be watching The League, which is hilarious. And Married is great too. I mean, there's a lot of really strong comedy, and the drama is fantastic, and the people who work there are the nicest bosses you could ever pray for.
Scott?
I'll say underrated.
Gonna follow up, or you just gonna let it?
No, I'm just gonna let it.
Are you sucking up?
I'm just gonna let it. Oh, probably.
RJD, FX.
I first started watching FX. I got into what I think is still one of the greatest television shows of all time. It's Rescue Me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of how I discovered FX. And they've made me fall in love with series over series, sometimes unmercifully axing those series before they get to their conclusion, like The Riches. But I can honestly say one of my favorite shows on television right now is Justified. And then we've mentioned American Horror Story, The Americans, Sons of Anarchy, The Shield, Nip Tuck. Am I missing any, Sasha?
I mean, like Wilford and stuff, but Nip Tuck, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was my gateway drug. And I love Dirt. Dirt totally rocked my world.
I like Dirt too. I loved her. No, so obviously it's underrated. I'm like Sasha. More people need to watch it. If they wouldn't have so much rape and violence, they'd probably get better ratings, but they might not have me.
But the comedies are good too. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is great. Like a lot of people don't give their comedies. You guys should all watch The League. The League is so funny.
Is The League on FX, or did it get punted over to FXX?
It's double X.
Okay.
But I like that football reference you threw in there. That was nice.
She's a sharp one.
I'm going to tally the points real quick, and it looks like Sasha's in the lead. She dusted you both.
I feel like that's not that subjective, but I'll take it anyway.
After Scott mentioned the HBO show, I think that might have did him in.
You supported Gilliam. That buried you in my mind. So, all right. Well, Sasha, the floor is yours to rant about any topic you wish. So take it away.
All right. My rant this week is about something that has been haunting my nightmares since I saw it a few days ago, which is the movie Interstellar. Christopher Nolan's newest, something I was extremely excited about. It is a film. I don't believe in spoilers, so I'm not going to give you that much background, but basically the world has been invaded by something called the Blight, which is not dissimilar to what created the Dust Bowl. All that we have left is corn, and our last hope, Matthew McConaughey, who is a farmer, but also somehow a fighter pilot, gets sent into space with Anne Hathaway and two other people who might as well be wearing red Star Trek jumpsuits. And they have to find a new hospitable planet through a wormhole. This movie has incredible visuals. This movie makes absolutely no sense. It relies entirely on wish fulfillment and dream logic, and it has the trite commercialism of a Hallmark card. It was so frustrating for me to watch, and it's long. It's really long, and it feels long. It's 240, and you feel every minute of it, as compared to like Gone Girl, which is 230, and it flew by, and I was wrapped up in it the entire time. You can't deny the visuals, but the story is bad. Jonathan Nolan and Chris Nolan are responsible for it. And I feel like it plays into something that's really been frustrating me lately, which is filmmakers that I love from the 90s and 2000s absolutely falling off of their game. Jason Reitman, Thank You for Smoking, an incredible movie. Juno, Up in the Air, great movies. Men, Women, and Children is really weak. Kevin Smith, somebody who I adored, Clerks, Chasing Amy, Mallrats. Tusk is the least Kevin Smith movie he's ever given us. It's all that verboseness, but it's none of the heart. It's none of the humor. It's none of the interesting. And then Chris Nolan, who did Memento and Insomnia and The Dark Knight and Batman Begins. And then he gives us The Dark Knight Rises, which upon closer inspection is not that good of a movie, and Inception, which can go either way, and now Interstellar, it feels like these three men are the product of absolute power corrupting absolutely. They have lost their filmmaking way, and it makes me incredibly sad because they have great bodies of work, but they don't have people standing next to them anymore saying, you shouldn't do that. It's the Johnny Depp syndrome. You get so much money, you get so much power that you're like, story, whatever, let's just make something and make money. And it bums me out. And Interstellar, I was so frustrated in the third act. I just kept throwing my hands up because I was like, this makes no sense. This makes no sense, which would be fine if it wasn't a movie that keeps throwing science down your throat as if it's supposed to be meaningful. And there is the worst case of stunt casting I've seen in a really long time. And it felt cheap and it was insulting. The end.
Oh, wow. That's a rant.
Oh.
I am shocked.
I'm pissed. I'm so mad at this movie and people are angry. I already like tweeted something about it and people were like, how could you say that? I'm like, dude, you haven't seen the movie. There are people that are going to love it because visually it's incredible, but so is Gravity and it's a better movie. I look at Moon with Sam Rockwell. That's a movie about space and about loneliness and about heartbreak that is so personal and so emotional, which is what Interstellar tries to be, but fails massively at.
Well, we are in a society that favors style over substance, so that's not particularly surprising you're getting some hate for your views on it.
I thought Nolan was one of our directors that, especially, I think in at least two of the Batman films, like she mentioned Memento, what a home run Memento was. I thought he was going to inject a little substance in it, but it sounds like he's went over the Inception cliff there.
This movie is weaker than Inception. Inception is a better film than this, and that's not good.
Sasha, the bearer of bad news.
Sorry. Sorry to be the super buzzkill. No, but I think that's why I'm so mad, because I love Christopher Nolan. And he is somebody he's not somebody who puts out ridiculous trailers that show everything. He guards his films really closely so you can have a true cinematic experience when you sit down and you watch them. And watching this movie, I mean, there is an action set piece that is stunning. We're talking like take your breath away, edge of your seat, so well done. But when you actually look at it within the context of the film, it makes no logical sense. It was thrown in there entirely so they could have a big action set piece. And it doesn't even work within the timeline that they're trying to create. There's so much about the movie that is nonsensical, and it's all Deus Ex Machina. Like they're just throwing in things to be like, oh, we painted ourselves into a corner, do this because it'll propel the film, as opposed to saying, what's the logical next step? How would this actually play out? What's a good story? And what is compelling? Not just, well, we have nothing else to do, so let's do this. And it really relies on its cast to charm you into believing that it's good, because that's what McConaughey does best. Like I will sit down and I'll watch 10 Ways to Lose a Girl or whatever because I want to, or How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. There you go. Just because I like him enough that I'll watch it. I will sit down and I'll watch Interstellar because I like him enough to see what happens when he goes to space. But once I'm sitting down, you have to deliver something that is worthy of my 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh.
And it's really, really frustrating. It actually might even be longer than that. It felt like it was 3. It felt like it was 4, quite honestly. I mean, I was huffing and I was trying really hard not to diminish the experience of the people around me who were watching the movie too. But a couple of people, I could hear them groaning because they were like, oh, come on.
Wow. All right.
That's a home run, Sasha.
That was
I'm sorry to bum you guys out. He has not done a great movie that was on par with the stuff he did earlier in his career since Dark Knight Rises.
What do you think it would take for him to get back on track? Or is it too late?
Less money. I think that, they say necessity is the mother of invention, and he obviously has a brain that works in really wonderful ways, and he knows how to shoot the hell out of a scene. But it's almost like he has too many toys to play with, and he doesn't know how to utilize them in a smart way, so he just throws all of them in, and it just gets muddied. And I mean, I think Insomnia is a great film that people haven't paid enough attention to. I mean, Robin Williams is so brilliant in that film, and he does such a masterful job of creating tension. I just think that, like, Batman Begins is so good, and The Dark Knight is brilliant. But then it literally becomes like he becomes a philosophical filmmaker instead of an actual filmmaker. He got into this really self-indulgent, erudite. I don't understand what happened with both Inception and Dark Knight Rises, and now with this, but they all feel similar. So I think the smartest thing would be for him to make the film that uses less and forces him to make more of his own talents.
It's the Peter Jackson syndrome.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. But again, look at what Jason Reitman has done, and look at what Kevin Smith did this year. I feel like a lot of filmmakers who are just, there's not every movie is going to be good, obviously, and not every filmmaker is going to have a prolific career. But it feels like all three of them fell prey to almost the exact same thing, which was too much money, too much access, and not enough creativity.
I agree with that. Scott brought up Rocky earlier, so I'm going to use a Rocky reference. I think maybe sometimes they just lose the eye of the tiger. They lose that hunger of the young, filmmaker, the edge. And I hate to blame it on money and success, but look at who we're talking about. They've all had a lot of money. They've all had a lot of success. It's harder to make that film when your grandkids' college is paid for than it is when you're just struggling. You're a different person. I see it all the time with music. Look at the first several Metallica albums versus the last few Metallica albums. You're super rich and you can't make that type of film anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin Smith is interesting. I'm like you. I like his work, and I've always liked his work. And when he did Red State, he didn't, shop that around really to distributors. He took that kind of like on a tour, and he would bring it to the Alamo and Austin and, wherever else across the country. And he made some bank doing it that way. But with the new one, Tusk, where he did get it distributed through, regular means, it just tanked. So maybe it's is it actually just because it's a bad movie, or is it just distribution?
No, Tusk is actually a bad movie. Yeah, no, Tusk is bad. I mean, there was very little redeeming about it, and I think that I'm really interested to see what happens with Interstellar, because I think that it's going to have a massive first week and a pretty good second week, and I think it might. I'm guessing, but I think it's going to fall off a cliff after that. I think the word of mouth on it is not going to be good. And I may be totally wrong. It might make $500 billion and people are going to love it. And maybe it's just me. And I was not wanting to be manipulated emotionally that particular day. But I don't think so. I think that I think it's too long. And I think the third act is too disjointed and too off note. Yeah, like when I think back on it and I think about how they decided to wrap up the film, I'm like, oh, you guys are such douchebags.
And that wraps up another episode of the Supernaughts. I want to thank RJD and Scott as always, and a special thanks to Sasha Perl-Raver.
Thanks, Sasha. It's great to have you.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. This was super fun.
You can find out more about Sasha by the links we'll post on our website. Have a topic you want to talk about? Maybe you think you have what it takes to go up against Scott or RJD. Contact us at our website, thesupernaughts.com, or leave us a voicemail at 575-578-1118. Next time on the Supernaughts.
They need to get rid of classes and just let the characters pick feats.
That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How can you get rid of classes? It wouldn't be an RPG if you didn't have classes. Deadwood for me. Deadwood was responsible for my writing my novella, but Deadwood was just a fantastic show.
It's a really, really good novel, really good show, but this is a different network.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
Love the novel, brother. I love it.